Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lisa Ammon and I serve as president of the Louisville Forum. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month at Vincenzo's Restaurant. The Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public policies group founded in 1984. The Forum hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. Although we may take up an issue of national significance, we try to highlight the local perspective. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make reservations, please visit our website at louisvilleforum.org. In light of the recent events in Dallas, Minnesota, and Louisiana, we would like to discuss these issues surrounding those events. Major cities across the U.S. have experienced a surge in homicides in recent months, continuing a trend that began last year. Experts cannot agree on what to call the rise in homicide rates, much less its cause, but data is showing a sharp spike in homicide rates in more than 30 cities, according to data released by the Major Cities Chiefs Association. The data tells us a varied story. Some cities have experienced a slight rise, while nearly a dozen metropolitan areas have experienced sizable increases. Cities like Chicago, Dallas, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles all showed significant increases in homicides from the previous year. In Louisville, we've seen a 58% increase in the year-to-date homicide totals. Experts attribute the increase in murder rates to heroin and drug epidemic, a resurgence in gang violence, poverty, and economic factors. Recently, Director James Comey of the FBI linked the rising crime to the Ferguson effect, a theory that law enforcement has been less aggressive because of concerns about being recorded and potentially charged with a crime. Since the peak in the early 1990s, murder rates have dropped and are at historic lows. However, in some cities like Louisville, they are on the rise. In a New York Times article, James Allen Fox, a criminologist at Northeastern University, was quoted as saying, "What's basically happening is these cities are becoming victims of their own success. The crime rate can't go to zero, and when you hit really low numbers, it can only go up." Criminologists have yet to determine whether the homicide spikes are short-term increases or if this is a beginning of a new trend. In Louisville, we've seen peace marches involving police officers, community leaders, and neighbors signaling a willingness to address the problem. Mayor Greg Fisher created the Department of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods with the primary objective to reduce the number of violent deaths experienced by young adults and decrease the number of youth exposed to violence. As the murder rate increases in our city, we must examine how did we get here and what do we do to stop it. Participating on our panel today is Chief Steve Conrad, Councilman David James, Christopher 2X, and Matt Glowicki. Our first panelist today is Chief Conrad. Chief Conrad began his career as a patrol officer with the former Louisville Division of Police in 1980. Conrad worked his way through the ranks, rising to assistant chief in the newly merged Louisville Metro Police Department. Chief Conrad left LMPD in 2005 to become chief of the Glendale, Arizona Police Department. Conrad returned to his hometown as chief of police on March 19, 2012. Please welcome Chief Conrad.
Good afternoon, Lisa. Thank you for the kind introduction. I appreciate that, and thank you for the opportunity to be back in front of the forum. This is the fourth time that I've had the opportunity to speak before this group, and quite honestly, I wasn't originally part of this panel. I saw the topic, I was interested, I actually paid for my meal and was going to sit out there with you. I wanted to hear what this great panel had to say, but quite honestly, when I saw the topic, I asked them to allow me to be a part of this, and they were very generously consented. I'm going to repeat a few of the things that Lisa said in terms of how we got here, what I think is driving the crime, and what we're trying to do to address it, and most importantly, what people here in this room can do to help make Louisville a safer city. This is a really simplistic explanation of what is a complicated problem in society and quite frankly in Louisville, and at least from my point of view, the main drivers behind violent crime in our community are first and foremost poverty, the lack of economic opportunities for many people in those poverty-stricken neighborhoods, the impact of narcotics and addiction to narcotics in this community, the access to guns and the failure of institutions that most of the people in this room counted on to help them find success in life. And I'm talking about your family, and I'm talking about your school, and I'm talking about your church, and I'm talking about the criminal justice system, which quite frankly, people involved in the criminal justice system, whether they're dealing with the police or the courts or the prisons or the jail, they've been let down. We have not done what we needed to do to meet their needs, to help them come through that process less inclined to be involved in future criminal activity. Let me just speak real quick to the homicide rate. And Lisa quoted where we were at one point earlier this year. Unfortunately, last July was a particularly violent month. We had 14 homicides last year. So in comparing our homicides this year to last, right now, as of today, we have had 56 homicides in our community. That compares with 45 last year. We are right now at a 24, almost 25% increase as compared to last year, as opposed to the 58%. But last year we had 80 people killed in our community, the most we've seen killed since 1980. And I am so worried that if the trend continues this year, we could find ourselves topping that. The most we've ever had, based on records I've seen, was back in 1971. We had 110. My goal is to stop it and to do whatever we can to stop it. Lisa talked about this being a national problem. In looking at that study last year, 44 of the 65 largest cities had an increase in their homicides. This is a national trend. I don't know if it's going to be an ongoing trend, but it is something that is happening everywhere. Easy access to guns is a big part of the problem. Studies I've read indicate that there are over 310 million guns in this country. The vast majority of these guns are in the hands of people that are Second Amendment folks. They take care of their guns, they keep them safe, they don't cause problems. But what we see are guns are finding their way into the hands of criminals. You can buy a gun anywhere, anytime. No background check, no ID, you don't have to be 18. Anybody that has a gun can sell you a gun, and that's what is happening. The secondary market is just open for anybody that wants a gun to buy a gun. We have people that are committing crimes with stolen guns. It is just a terrible problem. I mean, this year already we've taken over 800 guns off the street that were in the hands of people that were not able to possess them lawfully, or they were in the process of committing a crime with those guns. And a crazy part of this is, under state law, after those cases are adjudicated, we send those guns to the state police, who are then required to give them or sell them to licensed firearms dealers, who then sell those guns and put them back on the street. So we are not making any kind of progress in terms of truly getting guns off our street. Another driver of crime in our community is the lack of conflict resolution skills on the part of young people. We have young people in this community that are carrying guns because they're fearful that someone else might hurt them. And when they see a slight, when they get angry, what years ago we might have gotten into a fist fight over, they are now killing each other over. We have seen way too many young people involved in these criminal activities. We have people that have had lack of success with the criminal justice system. We've had people that have been involved in gangs. All of this contributes to the problem. And just real quick, because I'm running out of time, our response is to focus on the places where we're seeing the vast majority of these crimes, and to make sure we're focusing on the people that we believe are involved in this violent criminal activity. We've identified people that have been involved in the past. We have information that leads us to believe they're involved in the shooting, or they're directing the shooting to be done, and we're doing what we can to get these people into custody. We're working with federal, state, law enforcement officers, and also the county attorney, the U.S. attorney, and the Commonwealth attorney to try to address these problems. In terms of what you can do, and this is, again, my main reason for wanting to be here today. If you know anything about a crime, call 574-LMPD and give us that information. It is anonymous. You can share that information with us. People believe we know everything there is to know about a crime, and the truth is, 18 of the homicides we've had this year have not been solved, and someone in this community knows what happened, they can give us that information and they can do it anonymously. I would ask you to show open support from the members of the Louisville Metro Police Department. We saw an outpouring of support for the Nashville Police Department over the loss of the officers they had. We have seen that kind of support here in our community, but the men and women that are out there doing the job in this community are wonderful people who have dedicated their lives to trying to serve this community, and they need to know that the vast majority of the people that live in this community do support them, do care for them. They expect them to do a good job. They expect them to be held accountable if they make a mistake, but they want to know that you're there for them. Finally, I would ask you to consider getting involved. Parents need to be very involved in the lives of their kids. Take a minute to look at what they're saying and doing on social media. If your 13-year-old on their Facebook profile is flashing a gun sign, or flashing a gang sign and holding a gun, you might have a problem. It is important that you know what your kids are doing and saying on social media. And I would also ask you, if you want to get involved, there are dozens of nonprofits in this community that are doing amazing jobs helping young people. I would ask you to volunteer for one of them. I would ask you to become a mentor for a young person that needs help going the right direction. And if you don't have time to volunteer or mentor, think about writing a check to one of these organizations because they all need your help. Thank you. Thank you.
Again, real quick, I just want to mention your questionnaire cards on your table. We encourage you to ask questions of our panelists, and we'll have some board members walking around to collect those. Our next speaker today is Christopher 2X. Christopher 2X is a community leader and anti-violence advocate. He's been an active voice for the voiceless since 2004. In March 2006, Christopher 2X took to the public airways to expand the message about anti-violence situations, the root causes of violence, poverty, at-risk youth, and subsequent incarceration issues. Christopher 2X's #1 goal is to bring a healing presence to the varying chaotic situations that arise throughout Louisville Metro. Please welcome Christopher 2X.
Thanks. So at first, I'd like to start out and just say that I was really angry at one time in my life, but if it wasn't for a member of the Louisville Forum, who's a former family court judge, who actually let me be his mentee and vetted me to see if I really wanted to be a peace advocate, I wouldn't be here today, and that's none other than Louis Waterman in the back. So I got to give Louis a hand. My man. However, I don't have to go over what Chief just said. I want to kind of just share some thoughts on the other numbers that are really serious in this community, and that's the numbers of the wounded. And we'll just talk about 2015 to currently now 2016. At the end of 2015, I think Chief M reported that we had at least 360 individuals in this community hit by gunfire. And a lot of those individuals that were hit, of course, they were survivors. They weren't included in the bigger homicide number that Chief was talking about as far as the 80 or so. And then this year already, Chief Stem's latest numbers in about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, close to 240 plus citizens have been hit by gunfire this year, including the 56 homicidal deaths now. And a lot of my work is concentrated in exactly what Lisa said in the opening, which is a mantra of healing, mercy, and compassion as a way to deal with these engulfed anger and rage issues, especially as it relates to the young, and them not having the structure or the tools to properly deal with these emotions. And like Chief just pointed out, once they have access to guns, and then the neighborhoods have been saturated with illegal guns or some legal purchase where somebody might have took some money and went and got them a gun, or they stolen some guns in a burglary or whatever, that becomes a volatile situation because of, again, their coping skills are not that great. At the end of the day, though, you can learn a lot from the mouths of babes. And one thing that I pride in my work is going to University of Louisville Hospital, and for almost 8 years now, collaborating with trauma outreach and its trauma surgeons. And some of the very young, whether it's at Courier Children's Hospital on rare occasions, currently now working with a 9-year-old turned 10 and got hit by stray bullets just downtown in East Louisville playing basketball on the court. Or some of the younger ones are 13, 14, 15 years old. They want to seek revenge when they get hit and when they get hurt. But the key thing is to be by their bedside and try to nurture them into a mindset to pivot away from that kind of behavior. How is it some of these children live in the same dire impoverished situations, and they don't act out like that? For some reason, we've got to at least attempt, when I say we, internally, the people that are bombarded by this issue. We can get the external help, it's welcome, but until there's an internal will to flip this thing around, it's going to be pretty tough. But when you're at their bedsides and they can give you the stories about how they started to be nurtured early on in life, it breaks your heart. Because some of them were just abandoned at an early age. And so that anger and rage just builds and builds and it's ready to explode at any point. Case in point, I'll point out to you all something that you're very familiar with that unfortunately occurred on May the 5th of this year, 2016, at 4th and Broadway. And I was right up there and I seen Chief when you had to come across the street. There's 2 boys that met a boy from the neighborhood in front of law enforcement in close proximity. Citizens watching the Pegasus parade just start following gunshots. And that thing could have been more chaotic than it was. God forbid if they would have ran right in the direction of the parade, officers chasing them with weapons out. And one of them could have turned around and just aimed at the officer. Then what? I would say this, and I'm going to kind of wrap up on this, is that myself and the surgeons from the University of Louisville Hospital, the trauma surgeons, we're starting to get out in the community and talk about these shootings as a public health issue. The American Medical Association just sent out a memo several weeks ago that they believe these urban shootings have become a public health issue. Not your conventional diseases, but an unconventional disease. And our whole goal is to break the apathy ice, if you will, to try to get everybody to understand that there has to be early intervention if we want to turn this thing around. And Chief was right. If you all can help any worthy nonprofits, if that's in your heart and you don't have to be on the front line or anything, please do so. But keep the peacemakers in mind too, because peacemakers need help too. And I know we're going to get into other discussions about some of the national things, but at the end of the day, folks, it's about caring, and it's about having a heart that can at least advocate for healing, mercy, and compassion. Thanks.
Thank you. And now for our third panelist, Councilman David James. David James is a native of Louisville who is dedicated to community service, and public safety. In 1984, James joined the Louisville Police Department to begin his career in law enforcement. Councilman James has held elected positions of President and Vice President of the Louisville Fraternal Order of Police. From 2004 to 2007, he was Commissioner of the Kentucky Bureau of Investigation, the investigative arm of the Kentucky Attorney General's Office. He was elected in November 2nd of 2010 to serve as councilman of Metro Council's 6th District, representing the neighborhoods of Algonquin, California, Limerick, Old Louisville, Park Hill, Russell, St. Joseph, Shelby Park, Smoketown, Jackson, Taylor Berry University, and the Central Business District. Please welcome Councilman David James.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everybody. Chief Conrad and myself, we joined the police department together almost at the same time. Back then, he had black hair, and I did have hair. So I've known him for quite a while. And I'd like to echo many of the things that everybody else has already said, but I want to try and and frame the discussion a little bit around some numbers so that we're all talking about the same thing. So this year we've had 249 shootings. We've had 80 stabbings, and now we've had 56 homicides. That's a lot of citizens. And as Christopher had said, homicides are very concerning for me, but what I'm really concerned about is the acts of violence. Because the stabbings could have very easily been homicides. The shootings could have very easily been murders. Sure. It's just a matter of bullet placement and how well they can shoot. If you've ever seen any of our young people shooting, they don't shoot very well, thank God. And then the other part is that the doctors at University Hospital have become very well equipped at taking care of gunshot wounds, and I attribute that to saving a lot of lives. When we talk about the age ranges of the people that have been shot, 35% of them were from the ages of 18 to 25. 24% of them were the ages of 26 to 35, and 15% of them were under the age of 18. 76% of them were males, and 24% of them were females. The most dangerous day of the week, I guess the best way to say that, is on a Tuesday. The most dangerous hour is between 11 and midnight.
Wow.
And so why that is, I really don't know. We talk about it all the time. When it comes to the stabbings, 40% of them are from the ages of 26 to 35, 18% of them are from the ages of 18 to 25, and 11% of them are the ages of 36 to 45. 70% of them are male, and 30% of them are female. The racial breakdown is 55% of them are black, and 41% of them are white. Well, let me go back to one other thing. The divisions in which our shootings take place most often are, the number one division is the second division, and then comes the fourth division, and then comes the first division. And most of that is West Louisville. West Louisville also happens to be our most impoverished part of the city. It also holds the most number of African Americans. And so I'll bring this out to a larger national discussion. There was a recent study done that the Forbes magazine's richest 400 Americans have more wealth accumulated than all 41 million African Americans in this country. Wow. So I just want you to think about those numbers. And then when we come to our homicides, the number of homicides at 56 right now, the second division is the number one district for that, and then comes the fourth division. The age breakdown of that is 32% of them are from the age of 18 to 25, 24% from the age of 26 to 35. Of our males, 74%, females, 26%, and the races of the victims, 63% are African American and 31% are white. And as far as homicides go, the most dangerous days, I guess the best way to say that, is on Saturdays and Sundays. And again, late at night. If your grandmother ever told you, don't be out after midnight, there is a reason for that. Yeah. And so when we look at the numbers and we talk about what's going on in our community, I would again echo the things that Chief Conrad and Christopher said. We need your help, and we need it in many different ways. I often talk about one of the programs that we have here in the city, which is called the Right Turn Program, where we have adults that mentor young people. We have about 475 youth that need mentoring, but we have about 90 mentors. And so if you have about an hour a week that you could spare, we could use you. And if you don't have an hour a week you could spare, there's lots of other things we could do, and I'll be glad to talk to you about that afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, and rounding out our panel is Matthew Glowicki. Matthew is a Chicago native covering Jefferson County and southern Indiana courts as a reporter for the Courier-Journal. He has written extensively about crime and the murder rate in our community. Please welcome Matthew.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I just want to first thank the Forum for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to share a bit of the work that I've done over the last 2 years or so since I moved to Louisville. And thank you to all of you for showing up today. I think we can all agree this is a pretty critical conversation that really ought to be at the forefront of people's minds, living here in Louisville. So like I said, I've been in Louisville for about 2 years. Came from Chicago, where there's, as I think we all know, no shortage of crime news, but I'll be the first to admit, growing up, I did not really tune into it very often. It's not uplifting news to hear, but it's been a complete 180 now covering these types of crime here in town. It's one thing to see it on the news, certainly. You read about it in the paper, online. But going to these different crime scenes, mostly homicides, shootings, it's just been really eye-opening for me personally, just as an individual. It's certainly not like TV. It's not like CSI or Law and Order. You're at the crime scene and you see the ambulance roll up. You see the person's body still lying there, getting cold. You see a family member rush up and realize that their loved one is just beyond that tape and isn't coming back. It's going through the court records, through the case files, reading investigative reports, and just seeing some of the seemingly senseless ways that people are dying and the inhumanity that can happen in these instant moments. And it's on the back end when you're covering a trial and seeing two families on both sides of that room who are hurting, and just one of my takeaways is just how senseless it is, and so I think bearing witness to it as a reporter, I think has been important, and that's why I'm so glad I'm able to share this with you all. But it would I think be a great thing if there was more active engagement by the community, and that's kind of what we're hearing. From our speakers today. I often hear in talking with the community that there are programs that exist, whether or not they're perfect, up for debate, but there are structures in place, but the people to help fuel them and actually get in touch and really make them successful, maybe that's where the follow-through isn't. We hear that kind of theory. Because what I often hear is, I see the numbers on TV, but I don't know what to do in my life. I don't know how to help. So I know that's one thing we struggle with at the paper, is trying to figure out how not just to talk about the problem. I think we can all agree there's a problem. It's how to connect people, with caring hearts who want to help and actually channel that into action. I won't talk too much longer. I have everyone up here, said most of the things I would want to say, but I just want to point out that data that Councilman James was reading aloud, that's all up on LMPD's website by and large. Something that I check quite often because it's my job. I'd encourage other people to check that out more often, to really understand that you can learn about some of these issues, not at just forums like that. You could do it on your couch. Staying informed, I think, is a general good principle, but particularly on this issue. And secondly, just so you all know, in case you haven't seen the news, I mean, there is certainly work being done. Again, the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. You had criminal justice discussion going on just at the council with this most recent budget cycle, talking about the shot spotter technology to figure out where gun violence is happening and how to more quickly respond to it. You've had the somewhat of a reorganization of LMPD's homicide unit earlier this year to focus not just on homicides, but also events that can help kind of precipitate some of those events. Now they're investigating incidents of gun violence. I'm sure the chief could speak to that more. So there is definitely work being done, and I've just been very grateful that Louisville's been so welcoming to me in helping kind of tell the story, and I'll keep on keeping on, and I hope people walk away from today with some sense of the work that's going on, and maybe a better idea of how they can play a role and help. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move into the question and answer portion of our program. So we have two questionnaires, Tom Vander Rostein and Greg Mays, who are both board members. So Tom, we'll start with you.
Okay. This question is addressed to Chief Conrad, but we may want to follow up with the other panel members if we could. Chief Conrad, what is being done differently today that wasn't being done last year? And when will you see improvement, or when do you expect to see improvement in the murder rate?
Both great questions. This year, our focus has really been on more intelligence sharing, working more closely together with the community, trying to actively get the community involved. Matt mentioned the reorganization where we've added additional detectives to our homicide unit to be able to address the shootings, because we have seen a connection between the shootings that occur in our community and many of the homicides that occur. In looking at this year's homicides alone, 8 of the people who were killed, 8 of the suspects who were killed were people that we had arrested in the past. They were out of jail on pending charges. So we're finding that we are identifying the people that are getting in trouble, we are arresting those people, they're getting back out on some sort of bail, and then they're still out there either committing murders or they are being the victims of murders, and it is really a challenge for us to try to collect that information. We're coming together on a weekly basis. It used to be we referred to it as ComStat, where we shared a lot of information about what was occurring, and what we're really trying to do now is make sure that we know and understand what is happening in each one of these neighborhoods we refer to as a hot spot. It's never a good thing to have your neighborhood referred to as a hot spot. But we want to make sure we understand what's happening, when it's happening, who's involved, and how we can go about arresting the people involved in an effort to make that neighborhood safer. And that really involves community involvement. And we have had a number of outreach programs that we're continuing to expand upon to try to get people more involved. One of the things we just started are the peace walks. I've been out there on Tuesday evenings in the neighborhoods that are seeing the vast majority of violent crime, and we're going to continue that every Tuesday, just to try to give people an opportunity to connect with me. We've asked our officers to get out of their cars. We've had over 1,000 times documented this year where officers have stopped the car and gotten out and talked to people. They are very busy, they do a phenomenal job, but if they don't slow down, park that car, and get out and talk to the people they're serving, they're not going to be able to make our community safer. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing. In terms of trying to make things better, it is dependent on what happens in this community and what we try to do about it. And you've heard me say this before, but I can't say it enough. We're not going to be able to wrest our way out of our problems here in this community. Every year we take about 30,000 people to jail, and we still have what everybody will agree is an unacceptable level of violent crime in our community. The police department is out there working hard, but we are finding people that we're arresting getting out of jail. We are finding people that we do arrest being given very light sentences and not being held accountable for what is occurring. We are finding when we do arrest people and they do stay in jail, there are other people that are out there in the wings to take their place, whether it's selling drugs, buying drugs, or what have you. It is going to be a continuing problem for this community, and it's going to take each and every one of us to get involved, whether it's a neighborhood watch or that volunteerism. This has got to be a community-driven solution. Reverend Elliott's right up here at the front table. He's got the Jesus in a Job program. That is a thing where he's got houses donated to his church. He's got people in the community that are convicted felons that couldn't get a job if they needed it. And he has worked to hire them to rehab these houses. I mean, that's just one grassroots example of the kinds of things that need to be happening in this community. And Reverend Elliott's done an amazing job without any real budget. That's the kind of thing that needs to happen if we're ever going to see changes in our community.
I touch on, I like something the chief was talking about as far as community involvement. So here's how I look at it sometimes, or based on interactions. You know, you have a certain part, especially as it relates to the black community, where the problem is really horrific as far as, you know, reckless shootings. So you have a culture that's already been created for generations where you have fathers, uncles, whoever, might tell the younger ones that's coming up behind them, you don't ever go to the police department. On any circumstances, you come to me because of whatever experiences they had in the past with law enforcement, whether they went to prison, whatever. That's just the way they think. So that's, you know, kind of a situation where when you have the escalation in gunplay right now, and then they've been nurtured from a very young age not to ever want to cooperate, and their own fears now that if you do cooperate, nobody can protect you from seeking revenge as it relates to a criminal case. That's where they're at in the mind. And then lastly, as it relates to some of the older citizens, unfortunately, they feel they're under siege. They feel at some level in their life, and deservingly so, they just want peace. And they have to not try and do their best to try to not get involved in what some of the young ones are connected to. And the great efforts the chief and Councilman James and others are putting forth with the walks, the peace walks, and trying to go door to door and get people more acquainted with, like what Chief was saying, officers who would like to come out on the beat. You know, it's like it's a horrific situation going on as far as the forces pushing back with this mistrust issue, and I just don't want to be bothered issue. It's deep, and we just need more people who are willing to try to educate people away from those mindsets.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Our next question.
Hi, this is a two-part question. The first part I'm going to direct to Chief Conrad, and the second part of it I'd like to open up to the whole panel. Do you believe that the events in Dallas have changed the mentality and leadership of the police force here in Louisville? And secondarily to the panel, do you believe with the Dallas police chief that the people are requiring or asking too much of the police?
To the first question, what happened in Dallas, and I had an opportunity to attend the memorial service yesterday along with Mayor Fisher, was just a terrible, terrible situation. Dallas is on the forefront of trying to improve police-community relations. They were out walking with protesters who were protesting the shooting in Baton Rouge and the shooting up in Minnesota. They were walking along with them to provide them with the protection they needed to be able to exercise their First Amendment right, to be able to speak out about those horrendous shootings. And the march was about over. And as they turned a corner, they came under fire from a man who we now know is a former Army Ranger and obviously had been planning for some time to kill essentially white law enforcement officers. And, you know, unfortunately, 5 of them were killed, and there were another 9 that were wounded, and then 2 or 3 other civilians were in the line of fire as well. You can't have something like that happen in a community because, quite frankly, in looking at the situation in Dallas, that's any community. Every community in America is experiencing protests, and rightfully so, outrage about the shootings that we've seen this past week in Minnesota and Baton Rouge. And we've had protests Saturday, Sunday, and Monday down near police headquarters. And in every one of those cases, you know, we want to make sure that people can exercise their rights and do what they're doing, because what they're saying is important, and we need to be listening to them. But at the same time, I want our officers to go home at the end of their shift. I want them to be safe. These these are 1,250 men and women that have signed up to do what they can to serve this community and do what they can to make it safer, but none of them wants to die in the process. And I want them to make sure that they're safe. We have made a staffing change. We've got officers riding in 2-officer cars. We're going to continue that for at least the foreseeable future. That may be something that we back off of after a while, but we want our officers to be safe. I've also asked that they continue to be as proactive as possible. They continue to engage the community. They continue to get out of their cars. They continue to walk, and they continue to do what they can to make our community safe, because we can't let these terrible homicides in Dallas keep us from doing all that we can to try to make Louisville truly a safer city. And there was a second part of the question, but I've already forgotten it. Do I agree with the chief in Dallas on something?
On whether or not, as a community, we ask too much of the police.
Absolutely. And it's not just here in Louisville. That is everywhere. I mean, the police department in any community is the only part of government that you can get on a 24/7 basis. We'll make house calls. I mean, we will come anytime you call to help you with any problem you have, whether it is a mentally ill person, someone who is on drugs, someone is in the middle of a domestic dispute. We're going to come to any of those situations anytime, but we're getting called about missing pets. We're getting called about, you name the problem. We are getting calls about it, and it's a challenge, and it's just because it's the middle of the night and they can't get a hold of anyone else. And it is a challenge. And I think, though, Chief Brown's point was really something more basic, and that is the fact that kind of the question we had earlier, when am I going to get the homicides under control? When are we going to properly fund programs that help young people succeed in life? When are we going to make sure that the schools have everything they need to properly educate kids? When are we going to make sure that the underlying causes of problems in our community are addressed the way they need to be? When are we as a community going to do, or as a country going to do what we need to do to get control of guns? Until these things happen, the police aren't going to be able to fix it. All we're able to do is respond to it, and it's frustrating.
Anyone
Dave?
else?
David, you sure? Okay. All right. So, Chief's right. They have tremendous challenges. Equally at the same time, you know, the mistrust that you hear about in the neighborhoods, people feel valid about it. However, there's got to be the willingness from individuals who at least are connected to the neighborhoods, who have at least courageous hearts, to look beyond the blue uniform and start to focus on the human being inside that puts on that uniform. They can equally be good stewards in trying to navigate conversations for those who are in fear or have those built-in experiences, whether they're factual in their life or not, or just perceptions, to try to create a set way to have a conversation, to create what I advocate, and I know Reverend Elliott advocates and others advocate, Councilman James, we still got to share this space. So one of the tools I always attempt to use is, let's use the power of the children to bring us into some common sense. So right now, some of the young ones in the neighborhoods, after all the things that have happened over the last week, we finally secured a meeting with the mayor, the chief, and hopefully some of his command staff tomorrow. So we can see if there can be this pipeline created for those who fear bringing complaints, for those who feel there's going to be a retaliatory deal going down if I bring a complaint, and to try to see if we can open up this dialogue a little bit better. Now, I've already been doing it. I've got past my fears of any law enforcement issues, because I go in with the mindset that I can look past this uniform and see how this human being is going to treat me, and then know how to respond in a proper way. Everybody doesn't have those built-in tools. I had to be cultivated that in time. But the end of the day is, again, I use the children as the foundation for us to share this space, not in a so-called lovey-dovey way, but on the basis of mutual respect. And if we do that, then we come to a common space, and we can concur on why we don't need to be so, I guess, aggressive towards each other.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up real quick. I think that we do place a lot of emphasis on the police, on the things that are going on in our community. And I'm going to push back a little bit and say, and the demonstration of that is that we asked the chief that question. Well, the police department's only responsible for a portion of that. We are responsible, all of us are responsible for the rest of that. It's easy to say, why didn't the police do this and why didn't the police do that? Well, the police are doing everything they can do, and they're working hard. Chief Conrad, I know him personally, and I consider him one of the nicest men I've ever met in my entire life, and he cares deeply about the things that go on in our community. I know that it hurts him to his soul every time he gets one of those text messages that says there's been another shooting. So I know there are people out there and say, why don't the police stop it? Well, it's like the chief said, why don't we fix poverty, right?
Exactly.
Well, why don't we put more teachers in the classrooms? Why don't we do a lot of things? Those things are upon us as a community.
Right.
And so that's all I'll say about that.
Great, David.
Thank you. Tom, our next question.
This is a question directed to Chief Conrad, but anyone could answer it. Are there any efforts being made to recruit new officers from the neighborhoods that are the hot spots, that are historically violent? Would this create more trust for any members of the panel, starting off with anybody?
Anybody? I mean, I can speak to it real quick and let everyone else talk. We are always trying to recruit new officers to our department. One of the things that we're in the process of changing is the minimum requirement. About 10, 12 years ago, we changed the minimum requirement to require at least 60 hours of college education to become a police officer. And what we found, there was a belief at that time that might actually enhance our recruiting efforts. And I think in the long run, now that we've had time to look at it, it has hurt us. There are many smart, well-intentioned folks that have a high school education who would love to be police officers, and they would be able to come and help us do that job. And I think that might fit many of the people in the neighborhoods that we're talking about. And we would love to get them in the door as police officers. We're going to be talking to the Police Merit Board next week about making that change, and we'll be taking applications under that changed environment. We're also using opportunities. We have a variety of outreach programs. One of them we use is our Citizens Police Academy, and we have people that come from the hotspot neighborhoods and other neighborhoods to the Citizens Police Academy and learn about the department and end up becoming police officers on the department. We're just looking for ways to build that trust, and I think Chris said it well. One of the things that we train our folks, I had a pastor in our community say, Chief, people believe you, and I don't mean just you, the chief, but anyone in that uniform, whether they're male, female, white, brown, black, it doesn't matter. You're the enemy when you come to our house until you prove us different. And you prove us different by how you talk to us and how you treat us. And I think that says everything about how we build trust with the community, and that is a big deal. But I think it's important for us to look like the community that we're policing and to make sure that we have connections to the communities that we're policing. And recruiting from the neighborhoods that are experiencing those problems is a great way to make those connections.
I was just going to say in my interviews with folks who generally don't have the greatest view of police for whichever personal reasons, they have expressed that they would feel more comfortable oftentimes if an officer were responding to the scene happened to look like them. And it would kind of reduce at least one barrier that they perceive in that being a successful interaction. But I know at the same time, when I've spoken with younger folks, and they say that they're distrustful or fearful perhaps, and they don't want to go into that pipeline. So it's kind of this dual problem, if to encourage people to kind of have enough faith in the system to want to enter it, to then be that person that you want to see responding to your events, your incident, whatever that might be. And so it's a little cyclical in that sense. And again, that's just anecdotal from some of the conversations I've had, but kind of breaking that cycle, I think, is where the aim of some of these programs that the chief had mentioned.
And I would agree with that. That we have about 23% African American working population in our community, and about 13% African American population on the police department. And that's, to me, is unacceptable. And but at the same time, we have recruits that regularly leave the police recruit academy either their first week or once they get their first paycheck, when they realize how little money they make, and they try to feed a family with that. And so I'll take this opportunity to say to the administration, we need to pay our police officers better, and that's just a fact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
This is to Christopher 2X. With limited resources throughout the community, and as we just discussed, in the overcrowded jails, what are your thoughts on going back to a system where we coach youth rather than incarcerate them and go more to a rehabilitation type system?
I'm all for restorative justice. And whatever we can do, all of us can do, to try to cut down on the incarceration problem, as long as it doesn't jeopardize public safety, I'm for it. And like Chief said, and he said it many a time, we'll never arrest our way out of this problem. 24 so thousand inmates, not in the state corrections. 22,000 will come out on a revolving basis as reentries. 2,000 being there permanently because of violent crime issues, murder, whatever. So, go back to public health issue. It sounds just like, okay, public, but it's deep. It's deep.
And Chief Conrad, as a follow-up, do you believe that the justice system and the jails are making youths and younger incarcerated individuals too hard? As in, when they get out, are they more inclined to commit crimes?
Based on what I know, and I can't speak to the jail, for the most part, Director Bolton, who is the Metro Corrections Director, has a number of programs where he is trying to help provide rehabilitation while people are in jail. He runs the largest detox center in the state.
Yep.
Because you've got people in there that are detoxing while they are waiting for their trial date. So there are a number of things that I know he's trying to do, but I have to tell you, kids going in the criminal justice system and coming out of it, many times they reoffend, and many times they are learning new skills when they are in jail or in prison or in youth detention that may not necessarily help them succeed in life as a legitimate person, but maybe as a criminal, and that does sometimes happen, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. And on behalf of the entire Louisville Forum, we thank everyone for being with us. As an expression of our appreciation, we have for each of our panelists a Louisville Forum goblet, which I will have to get afterwards because I didn't place them under here, but we do have a gift for you. And then we also have an additional mint julep cup recipient today. On behalf of the Louisville Forum, I would like to recognize last year's president, Dale Josie. Dale, if you would please stand. Dale's positive spirit and dedication carried us through last year. Dale, we thank you for your service, and you're to be commended on a job well done. Thanks. Okay, our next meeting will be held on Wednesday, August 10th. We will host the 3rd District Congressional Debate featuring Congressman John Yarmouth and Republican nominee Harold Bratcher. Reservations can be made online at louisvilleforum.org or by calling our voicemail at 329-0111. Thanks and have a great day.